Okay.
Staying or going? Thanks, bud.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. I'm Ray Gilmat. I'm the chair of the committee, and let my three wonderful cohorts introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Tina Sullivan, and I am on the committee, and I also am the assistant to the Select Board of Perry.
Don?
Yep, John Sarwashine, also on the committee. Thank you.
Scott?
Scott McNichol, I'm Selectman Committee member.
Yeah, that's us. You want to introduce your crew?
Certainly. My name is Tim McAfee. I'm the CEO of Pioneer Broadband. Behind me is Carter Kenny. He's our technical expertise engineering liaison. And over here is Brian Barton. He's the vice president of operations. And on this side over here is Sadie Hansen. She's in charge of special projects, governmental relations, and all the regulatory stuff that we do.
Very good. Before you get started, we got one item of business that we usually take care of, and that is to approve the minutes for the last meeting. Did you all have a chance to read them?
Yep.
Okay. Any comments? I thought Tina did a really nice job on this set. Pretty complicated. In fact, I had to go back to the recording to clear my mind up about a couple of things that she had down there, but I think we're all set. Does anybody want to move to accept?
I'll move to accept.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're all done that. Paul?
Aye.
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 Paul, member of the community? Do you want to say anything else?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not. I haven't read the meeting minutes yet, and so I'm no comment.
I actually didn't send them to you. I apologize. I did not send them to you. I will do that.
Is Paul a member? Is Paul a member of the committee?
Not formally.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
That's why we were left out, Paul.
It's okay. Story of my life.
All right.
Okay, Tim, do you want to take the floor?
Sure thing. So we know Paul because he's in my class at WCCC for fiber optic training technician. So he's familiar to me. And I know Elaine, but the rest of you are all new acquaintances, and I thank you so much for letting us come to talk to you tonight. We got a chance to speak to you after we looked at Janie Sullivan's presentation and Spectrum's presentation. We wanted to make sure that we could give you a little bit of the pioneer insight. Danny did a really good job about discussing DBU, but DBU is not an internet service provider. They're a dark fiber operator. So you would get an internet service provider with that DBU commitment if you chose to go that way. And we would be one of the first, if not the only one at this point in time. But we definitely work very closely with DBU. Currently, we build their networks, but we also provide service on their networks for Baileyville, Calais, Indian Township, and Alexander. Very soon, Cooper and Princeton as well. So we're going to talk to you tonight about how we would provide service if DBU were the chosen model that you were to go through, and kind of explain why and how. And we can talk about the quote, the estimation that was given to you for the build out and why and how that works. Maybe if Chris Waite joins us, he can speak to that a little bit too. But I think that one of the things to keep in mind here is that you have a committee for a reason. And the reason is because you recognize the problem. And that problem is that people in your town don't have adequate broadband, and I appreciate that. So when we consider what we would want to do to help or to be a provider in your area, it would be to provide the same service everywhere in your community. And that's why when you look at the bill of materials that we sent you, the price was very high because you have a lot of road miles, okay? And that's why incumbent providers haven't put higher speed services into Perry, because there are so many road miles to cover all the constituents. But with grant monies coming into the state at the rate that they are, and with DBU modeling a really good infrastructure modeling piece that allows open access, we're going to come at you with that particular perspective to show you what it is that we do, how we do it, and the why. You know, there's a lot to why and how we do what we do. So with that, I've got a presentation. If I can share it, is that possible to do?
It absolutely is.
Okay. All right, so there we go. So everybody has a different definition of broadband. There's a definition that's very technical that talks about how much data can be processed in a certain frequency of a wave. And then there's the FCC's definition of 25 megabits per second over 3. Connectivity Authority has a definition of 100 over 100 megabits per second. But we have our own in-house definition, and it is a networking connection to a structure, be a home or a business, that's both fast enough and reliable enough for the consumer's quiet enjoyment. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that there's a certain speed that we have to achieve. It doesn't mean that there's a certain type of medium that we have to achieve. It means that we're going to deliver something that you don't have to mess with. It's something that you can set it and forget it, if you will. A technology that you don't have to worry about when the next thing is going to come down the road, or if we had this, we could do that. It's something that is, we hope that users become complacent and take for granted the service that we provide. We want it to be that good. That's what we think a broadband connection should be. Something that you don't have to worry about. And like I said previously, you have a committee for a reason, because you know there's a problem and you don't enjoy your internet connection quietly. There are things that you may fuss about or wish were different, or actually have really big problems with, whether it be speed or price or availability. Those are all things that we hope to solve by providing the service that we provide. So we do fiber optic service. That's what we do. We started out as a wireless company. We did fixed broadband wireless from Madawaska to Dennisville, and Pleasant Point and Perry. So we did some wireless back in the day. We took over the Wabanaki Wireless ISP in 2006. We took over CCP Wireless in Calais, and we took over a company named Maine Farmers Exchange in Presque Isle. 2006 was a big year for us to expand our footprint, and we spent a lot of money on wireless and realized that wireless wasn't going to do what our customers wanted to do in the future. It wasn't growing, it wasn't scalable, and we decided to invest in DSL technology, and it didn't take very long for us to realize that that wasn't going to do it either. So in 2007 and 8, we started our fiber optic push. We started our own fiber optic network in Houlton. 2010, we built a fiber across the border into New Brunswick, because at that time, all of our data was leaving the state through Portland. And we didn't think that that was a good idea if something happened south of us, that all of our customers were stranded. So we built a connection across the border in Woodstock, New Brunswick. And we have since had and maintained a Canadian internet service provider as one of our upstreams ever since. Just to provide that diversity and connectivity so that our customers aren't left stranded because of problems that happen down south. So since 2016, our prices for broadband fiber to the home services are the same that you see in this left-hand portion of the slide. For 100 megabits per second, over 100 megabits per second, we've charged $59.95. We get a dynamically assigned IP address and unlimited data. The other packages are 300, 500, and gigabit per second. And all the taxes are included in there. So any fees and taxes, universal service fees, main connectivity authority fees, any of those fees are already blended in. So we back into a number. But we charge the customer $59.95. That's what they get charged. It's hard to say if we're gonna be able to maintain that pricing for another year or two. Things are, as you know, have all become very expensive and inflation is real. But if we ever do a price increase, it will be the very minimum, to maintain profit margins to a very low percentage of what we've enjoyed over the years. So we don't plan on jacking our prices up to some enormous value. But that's since 2016. So that's a pretty good run for that pricing. We don't charge any installation fees for our customers. We offer 1,000 feet of drop cable from the main network to the customer's home. After 1,000 feet, we charge a per foot price based on the market and what type of cable we're going to be bringing into the home. It's a very fair price. We don't mark it up. We just get paid for what we put up in our labor. So 1,000 feet is a pretty large number. That's between 4 and 5 pole spans in a rural area. Our competitors won't do that. That's a lot of costs that they don't wish to incur. We do have a standard customer acquisition cost that we work to try to overcome in the first 12 to 14 months. And that's why we price the things that we price. That's why we price the things the way we price them. This is our network. We have a ring. It's a self-protected ring. Right now it's at 20 gigabits per second, and soon this summer will be 160 gigabits per second. All of the purple diamonds are our roadside or central office locations where signals come in and get retransmitted, reframed, rebuffed, and cleaned up so they can go back out along the circuit. Any one of those links can break and the network still survives. One of our goals for the next few years is to build a connection in this area between Mapleton and Presque Isle to kind of put a belt along this, and between Smyrna and Holton to put a belt down here so that we have 3 self-healing networks in our footprint, giving us more redundancy and diversity. Currently, we have 4 internet service providers in Holton, 2 at one facility across town. They come across our 100 gig ring, and then 2 at this location, 34 Military Street. So we've got 4 internet service providers and a connection to the northern New England Internet Exchange in Orono at Neville Hall, where we pick up caching services from Netflix, Microsoft, Amazon, and a few others that are pretty important. We got funded 2 years ago by the federal government to put gigabit service into all these locations that you see here on this map. This is a stretched out view of the top of Washington County, but mostly Aroostook County here. And we concentrated on those areas because they're closer to home. And to win the reverse auction, we had to really scale down our costs and pare them down to something that was very close to break even. And that's how we won those particular areas. So over the next 8 years, the federal government gives us money every month, and we have to build these networks within the next 2 years and have them operational before the next 4 years in order to continue receiving our payments from the federal government. These are very small areas. The entirety that you see here on the map, all these dots and lines, are equal to 1,638 people that we'll be serving with this RDOF investment. RDOF is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund that was funded by the current administration 2 years ago, and the FCC was the arm of the government that managed that. This is the same auction, a reverse auction, where Consolidated got about $200 million worth of support to build throughout the remainder of the state of Maine. And Starlink got about $990 million to build all over the country. So it was a very big, high money auction. Starlink has since been removed from the auction recipients, so I expect we'll see another RDOF round very soon, but we're part of that. And these are the places that we'll be building. There's one down, I think there's one that we don't see, some Crawford, right? So there's one more offering that we have. Most of Crawford is covered by the RDOF bill that we will be providing. And we're currently in the permitting stage for all of those builds. When we put RDOF and we map it onto our ring, you'll see that the Crawford build is down here. We get to Crawford through some DBU facilities in Alexander and Baileyville, which are not shown on this map. But that's how we're gonna get to Crawford and serve them. Everything that we bid on was very close to the ring. This ring was developed in 2010 by the Maine Fiber Company. This is a 3-ring binder, northern ring and down east ring. We put together to make our own self-healing ring. This is no small feat for a small provider like us. Telephone company has plenty of these rings, but you know, we're just a little guy, so we had to come up with our own solution. And if it were not for that 3-ring binder, we would not be serving in a lot of the places that we serve today. So we have a couple of maps here that I can show you real quick, and it's our customer base as well as our monitoring system. Just to kind of give you an idea, we do not have a 24-hour technical support personnel staff. We're here until 6 o'clock Monday through Friday. We're here until 5 o'clock Saturday and Sunday, and holidays. We take Christmas and Thanksgiving off. There's nobody here in the tech support building at all, but our staff gets notified in the event of a major break or outage, and we'll respond to those accordingly if we're not in the office. We do have on-call technicians that respond to things, and our own in-house construction crews, 3 of them, which are scattered all over the state, that can respond to any emergencies that are present. This first link that I'll show you is our fiber to the home customer base. I think it might have opened in another window, so give me just a second, pop that open. Yeah. Okay, give me just a second, I'll find it. There. There we go. I'm gonna change it to you. I may be the coolest one in the room, but your password's already saved here. There we go. All right, so let's share that out. Now, can you folks see that browser, that mosaic?
No,
Okay, good. Let me get back to where I can share it accordingly. Set out here. That one right there. Let's use that one. Okay, so this is Mosaic. This is a piece of software that our access technology manufacturer, Adtran, has come up with to help us look at our actual network. So here's our in the strangest of views. Let me go to the map view. There we go. So this is a heat map that shows where we concentrate our fiber to the home activity. Of course, our home turf of Bolton, Hodgson, Ludlow, Linneas, New Limerick is pretty involved. And then we've got
Recording in progress.
there we are. Still there? Okay. All right, so you guys, can you see that all right?
we aren't seeing it yet.
Okay. You aren't seeing it yet. Let me stop the share. and
Now we can-
start. Now you can see it, of course, good. We'll give it a second. Okay, so how about now?
You bet.
All right, awesome. So this is where our network is. Holton, Sherman, Baileyville, Callis, Presque Isle, Oxbow, and pretty much Oxbow and Fort Fairfield. So these are our major areas. When we dial in to these, we can see the actual little customer bubbles that populate the area. So we're a very well poised competitive provider in Holton, where we have Spectrum and Consolidated, GWI, First Light, Otelco, Starlink, Hughes, and any other number of small competitive providers. Same thing when we get down into Baileyville and Callis. Due to the efforts of the Down East Broadband utility, we have some really good coverage in these communities. Lots and lots of coverage in Callis and Baileyville. Well-established network connectivity in all these places for a number of years now. And we hope to grow in that area. As of this date, 23% of all of our fiber optic customers are in Washington County. We're in a Aroostook County business, and that's where we started, but based on the investment that DBU and these 4 communities have made, 23% of our business exists in your county, which I think is pretty cool. And we're very excited to be there and be a part of that for sure. And as I mentioned previously, one of the other things that we do is we monitor our network quite readily, and it is managed by this network management system that we have. Let me go to that really quick. Shared out. All right, so we use what's that? Yeah, I know I gotta share it. I gotta go back to Zoom. Right there. Make this big again. You see it down there? Can I get that to go bigger? Right there.
Besides vision blog, like, well.
It says exit, oh, exit minimized. I thought it said exit video. I didn't want to do that. Alrighty, so this is our network management system. We are currently monitoring about 2,000 different devices on our network. These are switches, routers, access points, cameras, remote power devices, and what have you. This network management system is what allows us to be able to go home at night and
Recording in progress.
I don't know what's happening with that. Is it this computer? It's a Zoom thing. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's this computer or what, but let's see, top 10. Very value fast. Highest value. So we maintain records of bandwidth consumption, uptime, downtime. We graph every one of our data links and data segments.
Uh-oh, it seems like something went wrong.
It could be the battery on his laptop.
Something high tech, huh?
Something happened. Sadie, are you able to jump in?
I don't know the rest of his presentation, so no. I reached out to him though, to make sure he's aware.
I can say that it's nice to see the inner workings is the network monitoring. I don't think that Spectrum or Consolidated would have, gone to those lengths to show us those details.
And they're coming back in.
Recording in progress.
All right, well, I'm done sharing stuff because I don't want that to happen anymore. So let's see here. I don't know what it is with Zoom, or maybe it's this computer or whatever, but anyway, so here's where we were, and this is our build-out philosophy. We consider that building fiber to an entire community is what needs to happen because it's an infrastructure thing. You still hear me okay? All right. The norm has always been that incumbents will build to the middle of the town or the city to impact the greatest density, which is a great business case.
Recording in progress.
All right. I don't know if it has something to do with sharing or not, so I'm not gonna share anymore. So we consider building to the entire community. As what we need to do, because it's an infrastructure philosophy and not a maximum subscriber philosophy. So that's why we provided a network design and estimate based on Perry becoming a member of the Down East Broadband Utility and everybody in the community receiving the fiber optic service that we provide. So that is why when Ray and I talked about the size of the estimate, it was because there's so many road miles in Perry. It's a large geographic area with not very many people in it. And in order to build fiber to the home to all of them, it costs a lot of money. But that is the reason that we provided that particular estimate to you, because we think that that's what the people in the town of Perry deserves. And we think that that's what people everywhere should deserve, especially if there's money out there to be had to spend in rural areas to build broadband to all of them and not exclude the people on the outer edges of any community, whether it be a town or a city or a small village. So that's kind of the philosophy that we've gone with. And so that is our philosophy, and that's about us and what we do. We have 30 employees. We have 9 installers, or I'm sorry, we have 6 installers. We're going to be hiring 3 more from this WCCC class that we're teaching in Calais. We've got a construction crew of 7 people, a foreman and 3 full-blown 2-man crews and trucks to boot. We do about 3,000 to 6,000 feet of strand or fiber in a day with our construction crews. We install about 50 to 60 internet installations a month currently with our staff. And those numbers are impacted by the length of people's driveways, whether or not we have to license poles, and a number of other things, but that's pretty much our stats at this point. And I would be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
So is your network from down same? You said the 23% of your customers in Washington County. Are they with Pioneers Network or Down East Network? How does that work?
So Down East Broadband owns the fiber optic cables. Pioneer serves on those cables to our customers. So we aren't there unless DVU's there.
So is that all the way to Madawaska? I mean,
No, that's only in Callis and Baileyville, Indian Township, Alexander, any territory that DVU has, we're gonna ride their network instead of providing our own facilities.
so as we're talking to you tonight, are you proposing that we go with Down East in Perry, or are you proposing that we go with Pioneer?
So that's why we're talking tonight, because Down East Broadband gave you a proposal. And I don't really believe that they gave you all the information that was necessary to realize that with Down East Broadband Utility, you're getting a dark fiber provider. And you still need an ISP. So we would be the ISP, or one of them.
No, that was clear when Dan made his presentation.
Yeah, that I missed or, blanked out on.
So if I can kind of jump in for a minute, and Chris, I know you're here, so please feel free to weigh in. With Down East Broadband Utility, each community owns its infrastructure. DBU, Pioneer is the internet service provider at this point. A dark fiber open access network means that if Spectrum basically wanted to lease the lines, they could become a provider as well over the fiber.
Any provider.
That's right. Any provider can come through and basically lease the fiber and then become competitive in that. But right now, Pioneer is the ISP with DBU.
And
So
we commit on a town by town basis. So
if I can circle back a little bit, Tim, to what Scott may be asking, and maybe I'm wrong. Would Pioneer build out in Perry if they do not join DBU?
We would not build out in Perry if not for DBU, because part of our philosophy is that open access networks are going to allow me to hook up more people by spending money to acquire them and put them on the network than if I had to spend millions of dollars to equip your town with fiber optics. So, for example, back in 2014, I believe it was, we built fiber optics here in the town of Holton. We spent $2.2 million to build to every single household in Holton. That's all fine and good. But what that means is I've got to wait a long time before I'm going to make any money on the town of Holton. I could use that same budget at a rate of $650 to $1,000 per customer to acquire them and serve many more communities if they built their own infrastructure and give their people an opportunity to have competition that they don't have anywhere else. And they would own those facilities, those communities would own those facilities. So by us not having to spend the capital to put fiber optics in every community, when those communities do invest in them, we can put more customers on because we have more money available. If we were to do this in a lot of small towns, we would only be able to do one every 3 or 4 years because we just don't have that kind of capital. And if it's an infrastructure problem, that's why I believe that having the infrastructure problem looked after by the local community seems to make sense, because if there's money to be had for building such networks, instead of giving it to one single ISP to do something, why not take control of it as a municipality, offer your constituents a choice, the ability to choose providers if they choose to come and serve on the network. Your money is going to be better spent because you've got a better infrastructure and you have a better platform that will allow consumers to make a choice based on who's providing the best service. So that's kind of the philosophy that we run.
Okay.
So Tim, would you equate this model with compared to Consolidated or Spectrum, where they both own the infrastructure and the ISP? With DBU and Pioneer, we get a partnership that at some point, the town is essentially building equity to at some point own some of this infrastructure.
So with the DBU model, the town will own the infrastructure from the very beginning. And any revenue that comes back over time and pays off the investment would be going back into the town's general coffers as per the DBU model. But because the build for Perry is very cash heavy and you only have a limited number of households, getting back to that point of break even takes a long time. And you have to make sure that there's enough consumers to at least break even or pay the bills. And that's the beauty of the Down East Broadband utility, is they've got all the stuff set up for insurance and pole rights and maintenance and all of the other stuff that goes with running a dark fiber open network. And they will take care of all that stuff. And then everybody in the utility pays for everything in the utility. That's kind of it's a cooperative type nature. So with money that's coming in right now, Perry, in my opinion, is in a good position to make partnerships with other surrounding communities that may not score quite as well on a grant application. For example, your neighbors in Pleasant Point and Eastport that may desire to have similar services will not score as well on an MCA grant application as Perry will, due to the number of people that are covered by Spectrum already in those communities and in your community. You have a better chance of scoring in a more favorable way. So by regionalizing, and this is just a thought I'm throwing out there, by regionalizing the approach and working with your neighbors that are in a similar situation, that have an infrastructure problem, that have discovered they have a problem and want to fix it, you may do better in a regional application for MCA grant money in the next round.
I also just want to, excuse me, remind the committee that when Dan Sullivan from DBU met with you a few weeks ago, he did say that DBU will not take on a community if they don't believe the take rate will be there.
In other words, if there's not enough customers to make it worthwhile, then there's no town taking a risk.
That's right. You've got to make sure that there's enough people. If you assume a take rate for the number of households that are present, and you assume a time that you want to get paid back as a community, and that you can afford to pay the note, if you don't get that, then it's not worth doing. So that's why if you look at a grant that may fund as much as X% of your build, whatever's left over is what you need to come up with for the take rate and the number of customers that are there. For example, if you tried to get 75% of your build covered by MCA, then you'd have to come up with the 25% on your own by revenue generated by the network. So that would be one way of looking at it. And if you can't achieve that, like you said, it doesn't make sense to put your community out there and have them take a loss from the beginning. If the government money is there and available to be used, and you can design a grant proposal that will allow you to at least break even, or maybe you could even afford to take a little bit of a risk and go beyond that, then you can create an acceptable plan to move forward if everybody's in agreement. But we don't want anybody to get involved if they can't afford to do it.
If the town, the infrastructure are they liable? Who's liable?
So this is kind of it's an interesting question, because right now, the way that the DBU model works is that the town owns the infrastructure, but DBU insures it. If the model fails for whatever reason, then the town has to guarantee the loan over time. So that would be, and like I said, on its face, with the $2.5 million price tag, it won't work for Gary. It just doesn't work. But if you could get a grant that gave you a sizable amount of that money, and the leftover portion was something that the customer base that wanted to have fiber optic network could be considered a take rate, you could form a business plan around that and be willing to take that risk. So our take rate currently in rural areas is over 50%. So, you know, we normally figure 32% when we do grant applications for small rural communities, or when we do our own, when we were doing them for Connect Main Authority. 32% was a good round number for us to land on, but we've always come up with more than 50% in rural areas. In some areas, it's as high as 70%. Big Lake Township was almost 100%. So, you know, the people want faster, more reliable, high-speed fiber optic broadband. And, you know, there's only one way to afford that, and that's with the money that's coming down from the federal government. And if you can find a way to get some of it, then there's a possibility. But if you can't find it, there's no way you can afford to do it. For 300 and some odd households, you can't afford to pay a $2.5 million bill and walk out of it without going bankrupt. And we don't want that for anybody. That's why we'd encourage a regional approach to an application. And Chris, I don't know, maybe I'm all washed up on that, but you can talk to them more about that, but that's my opinion on the matter. The regionalization of an application by you and your neighbors seems to be a good fit, in my opinion.
Tim, do you think that we would reach, how confident are you that we would reach that 32% and beyond? What is your feeling about that?
Oh, you would reach 32%, no problem. None whatsoever.
Would you consider that a number for, not a break even, that's the wrong term, but if it was less than that, would you find that this is not feasible? But since you feel it's
for sure,
so much greater than that.
might not even be enough for,
We're almost 50% in Indian Township. We've only started doing installs since October.
So, I mean, there's
With a list of people that still want the service, so.
But the thing about Indian Township is they don't have spectrum anywhere.
That's true.
You know, so all they have is consolidated. But in Callis and Baileyville and Holton, where we have spectrum and consolidated that we go head to head with, we're over 50% in all those markets. So that's, you know, that's saying something. Those aren't rural. So those are places in a suburban market, if you will, or a rural suburban market that we're competing directly with the incumbents, that people are coming to us for service because it's better. So in a rural setting where they don't have more choices, then I don't expect that it'd be a problem maintaining or attaining a 32% take rate. Now, 32% is what we use. We haven't analyzed the cost-based analysis for Perry. We haven't done that. All we did is give you an estimate based on your road miles and the number of houses that you have, that we could build you a fiber optic network like Callis, Baileyville, Alexander, and Indian Township. That's it. But you guys would have to back into that and see if that 32% number would make it work.
Is there room in the 2.4 million portion for Perry where if the difference between grant funding is such that we could look at certain streets that only have, you know, one house per 5 miles and remove those from your proposal, that would help the numbers on that side of it? Is that?
You can definitely do that, but I will tell you from experience that the pitchforks and the torches come out. Because when DVU first did that in Callis and Baileyville, they left out the lamb farm plantation and the Nations Lake corridor up Chisholm Boulevard. And those people freaked out because the rest of the community got coverage of 100%. They called it 100% broadband coverage, and they were left out because it was too high cost to get there. And I just don't think it'd be a good idea. Yes, could you make can we back you into a fiber optic network for the people that live in downtown Perry and make it work? Yeah, because you're on Route 1 where the main fiber connections go through, and my fiber goes through there, and I can serve all the people in downtown Perry with little or no investment because I'm already there. It's the people that are on the side roads where I have to build to and where we have to get out to. The other 37 miles of Perry that we don't touch, that's what's going to cost money.
My question is, would there be any room though? Not a lot, but is there any room at all, you know, if we needed to trim to make this deal happen?
Like I said, you can do whatever you want. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, okay.
You can trim whatever you want. And if that's the choice that you make, you can do that. But I'm going to tell you right now that your constituents, if this is a publicly announced situation where the town is going to put their name on a loan to build something and everybody doesn't get it, it's a bad precedent to set. And I would not want to be on your board of selectmen and encounter what wrath may come from the people in your communities. I just don't think it'd be a good idea. But yes, we can pare down that build to whatever the town of Perry wants us to look at for designing a network for, but that's not really how we see this being beneficial to the entire town of Perry. This is more of the same thing that's happened for years with the incumbents building to the dense mass that can make them a buck. And this is an infrastructure issue. Yeah,
That's true too.
yeah, reduce your chances with MCA. If you're just building where Spectrum already is, you're not gonna get any money from the Main Connectivity Authority. So then you have to come up with it all on your own.
I got maybe one or two technical questions for you, Tim.
Certainly.
Are you aware that that Perry has an RDOF footprint?
Yeah, so is it CCI or Starlink that's your?
It's CCI.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about RDOF from a technical perspective. I don't know when or if they plan to build their RDOF holdings in your community, but I can tell you what they're obliged to do by the federal statute. They're obliged to serve 95% of the households that they get service money for in the state of Maine. They got 47,000 households that they're supposed to supply in the state. 5% of that is a fairly decent number, right? So it's possible that in the design phase of RDOF for the incumbent, they could possibly say, we don't need to provide for 5%. This particular community is not worth doing because it would be very costly and would take up a lot of dollars. We could very safely tuck them over into this pocket and call them part of the 5% that we don't serve. And we already see that doing our own RDOF planning. We've got a couple of customers that are 3 and 4 miles away from anybody. And if we only have to serve 95% of the 1,638 people that we're getting money for, we may not serve those 2 or 3 people because it may not be cost effective and we're not bound to do any more than 95%. So those are all economical reasons that, you know, they may not do what they can do and are funded to do because of that particular requirement. But they're going to do gig over gig on fiber if they build it. That's what they applied for.
Right.
Tim, is that 5% carve out by zip code, by town boundary?
By state.
General, okay.
Out of all the homes that what it's called is we get a support payment, kind of like child support. We get a support payment every month that says we're going to build to 1,638 people in the state of Maine, plus or minus up to a minus 5% of that in order to fulfill our obligation to the federal government.
Is there an impact on how you think about doing your bill for Perry, given that CCI might have these little pieces?
No, if you decide to go with DBU and you want fiber to every home, that's what we're building.
Right.
We're not afraid, nor are we against building over or near consolidated in their approach to do their RDOF build out.
That's good.
We
to
like
hear.
competition. We think that, you know, if they decide to compete, that'd be great. The problem is you're not going to get money for RDOF territories. So MCA is going to look at your map and say, this particular area here is already getting money for RDOF. MCA is not going to give you any money because Treasury has already told them they can't double dip for any part of any community. So that would have to be excluded.
And Tim, in that example, do they take away a per household number, or is it the actual construction cost to get to that disqualified service location?
I think they take away from the amount of money it would take to build to that location, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to look at the map and say, if your design calls for $700,000 to build to this section, we're not going to consider that $700,000. We're not going to give you that. We consider the rest of it, but not that amount.
Gotcha. Okay, so we could actually isolate that fairly easily.
And they have GIS shapes available on the RDOF website. We can throw onto the design and clip those right out of the monetary portion of the build. for the purposes of doing a grant application.
For estimating. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tim.
Tim, that's a good point. The RDOF map that Consolidated showed us represented about 20 homes, but when you go to RDOF directly, their map was even less than that. And so the impact
Well, the
is,
Oh, it's a lot more than that, Paul.
They don't have good
A lot more homes than 20.
okay, well, the
Yeah.
triangles that he showed us, there weren't many at all. But okay.
And that's the problem with that is it's all built on old data and they can't, RDOF, the folks at FCC cannot give us the addresses that they think are in those polygons that they gave money to support. So our contract says we gotta give service to 1,638 homes. And we said, great, send us the addresses. And they said, we can't. We don't know what they are. They're dots on the GIS map. We lassoed them with the polygon and the GIS system spit them out. That's what you have to serve. And we said, how do we know if we've served them? And they said, we don't know what to tell you. So that's where the federal money is going, to 1,638 addresses that they can't tell us what they are.
Great.
Fun stuff. So, you know, I see where you guys are coming from. I applaud your committee. You have a wonderful committee. You've done some very, very fabulous work. This is no small task. And, you know, I hope that you keep searching and digging in for the right answer, whether it be what DBU has to offer or what Spectrum has to offer or Consolidated has to offer. But I mean, you know, it seems like you guys have a pretty good head on your shoulders. Are going to do what's right for your community. But you know, I would definitely say that you've got to look at this problem as an infrastructure problem. If you really think that there's an issue, there's only really one way to solve it. And I believe that you all know that, else you wouldn't still be in this committee. That's my opinion.
Any other questions from the committee?
Tim, can you talk about the success from Township and surrounding areas? How did that go? Is that a similar rollout that Perry would receive, and maybe some timeframes?
So timeframes for the build out are dependent upon a lot of things right now. They're dependent upon the incumbent telephone provider giving us licenses because they own half the poles as well as the electric company. The other thing is supply chain issues. Fiber optics are between 36 and 58 weeks out when we order them. But after we've got all the materials, we can usually build a standard rural Maine town in less than 2 years from beginning to end. The Indian Township build was kind of an interesting one because Spectrum had abandoned their cables in Indian Township. They abandoned 4 miles of cable. So we asked Consolidated if we could take over those abandoned cables to save money on the make-ready portion of a build for Indian Township. And they agreed to let us take those spots and use them. It saved Indian Township over $400,000 to be able to grab a hold of those abandoned lines, and we were able to use them to lash fiber to. But anyway, out of 290 some households, we are more than 150. 159. So we're at 159 customers right now, and we just started doing installations in October of 2022. So you know, these people in Indian Township during the pandemic, 59% of their kids couldn't go to school because they didn't have adequate broadband. When they were learning remote, they had DSL from the incumbent, and they had some white space wireless thing from another provider that couldn't provide them with the upload capacity needed to see the teacher or their fellow students at the other end, because it was just not designed for that kind of thing. So they came to us in desperation, and we started building their network before they became part of DBU. They said, it doesn't matter if we connect to DBU or not, we need this network built, so will you build it for us and be a provider? And we started that process, and then we recommended that they join DBU because DBU has the administrative, insurance, and maintenance type things all in place and ready to go to support.
And what percentage of their build was MCA grant? Half?
About half of theirs, yeah, about 40% of their build was Connect Main Authority's final grant before it became the main connectivity authority. So they got $100,000 and some, so they paid for almost half of their build, and it's a very successful model for them. They also have a lot smaller community and about the same number of people, or the same number of households.
Do we have to commit to a provider before we can submit the grant application?
You don't have to commit to a provider, but you have to, you do. You have to have an ISP partner for an MCA grant, yes.
You can pick up more later, but you need at least one that's willing to partner to get the grant.
Sadie, are we right there?
Yes.
Sadie's the one that knows all that stuff, so yeah, the community has to have an ISP partner in order to proceed.
And so to the committee, excuse me, but when you're done, speaking with all the ISPs, I can get you a template to go out for an RFP. And so you would send a request for proposals to the incumbent ISPs and to Pioneer or whomever, and they would send you an official response back as to what they will provide and the cost. And I can get you that because MCA will be providing that, and you guys do have support from MCA, Main Connectivity Authority, even though you aren't a grant recipient because you came on board after the grant period closed. So an RFP, I can get you a template for that you will send out, and that's when all the information officially comes in from CCI and Spectrum and Pioneer.
And just keep in mind that if we are fortunate enough to receive a copy of that RFP and we respond to it, it will be with the caveat that we will do it in addition to or in partnership with DBU. DBU would be the company that would build the network. We would pledge to be an internet service provider on that network.
So I got to try and figure out how to word this. So how do we know what the cost is going to be to the town if we sign with Pioneer DBU, if we don't know how much we're going to get in grant funding?
So the estimate that I gave you, I think I can say this, is probably within 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done about 8 of these in the last couple of years. These desktop estimates that we've done are within 10 or 15% of the actual cost that we've gotten when we've gotten the go ahead to build. So I think that the number that we've given you is a pretty safe number. We would want to do a full-blown design as part of that, and I think that's part of the process for MCA, that you have to get a full-blown engineered design. Sadie, am I right?
I would have to check on that.
Okay, but as far as the number is concerned, the number that we've given you is a number that means every household in Perry that has a utility pole serving them or an underground utility access serving them will have a fiber optic strand that will be available to them at the head end facility in Perry where all the ISPs are. Okay.
I think this double check this, so I think you're asking. You're not signing a contract and agreeing to have something built until after you find out if you get a grant and how much that is. You're not committed to anything until after that point. We aren't in a position to sign contracts for Princeton or Cooper until after they were awarded X amount of money from MCA. Then they made the decision. Then we went to the contract stage.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And like I said, even if we're not the provider, or even if you don't choose us, if somebody were to come in and build you a fiber optic broadband network that gave you a fiber to every single home, it should be very close to the number that we gave you.
Do you have an idea of how much the difference might be? At some point, the town would have to go back to residents and say, okay, we're going to be on the hook for $500,000.
You won't know that until you get your grant application.
Yeah. With other towns, though, that you've worked with, can you give a rough number?
they're all different, right? So, every town that we've dealt with so far, we've given them an estimate.
Yep.
They've determined how much money they could be on the hook for if the thing failed, how much they could, the town could actually come up with
Yep.
without causing too much of a problem financially. And then they go to the bank and get a loan and sign a contract and build the network. And that number is based on the grant money that they get from Connect Maine or MCA and their appetite for investment in infrastructure that they can handle even in the event of a financial failure of the DBU model. Okay, so let's use it for example. If I say that your build is gonna cost $2.4 million to build Perry, and you put in a grant application for $2 million from MCA, if the town of Perry thinks that over 20 years, they can handle paying the note on $400,000, and your constituents agree, then you could accept the MCA money, you could go to the bank and get $400,000, and you can sign a contract with DBU to build you a network in which our company would be an ISP that pledges to come and serve you.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of how that looks. You have to back what you're comfortable with, apply for the moon, right? I mean, if you think that Perry can afford only $300,000, then you need to apply for $2.1 million, right? And you may not get it, but I'm saying you've got to know what you're after. There's got to be some skin in the game from the town. You're not going to get it for nothing.
Right.
I mean, we've seen plenty of towns try to do that. You won't get it for nothing.
Sure. And is it a tough sell to the town to throw out big numbers like this and to get everybody to agree?
So,
I mean, I'm all for it, but I'm just curious how other
hear ya.
residents would feel about it.
So I did the Callis Town meeting. One person opposed of all the people. I mean, they publicized this meeting and held it in the firehouse so lots of people could come. Baileyville was unanimous. Alexander was unanimous. And Cooper was unanimous. Princeton maybe had one holdout in Princeton. Indian Township, the government told us to build a network and gave us a check for $100,000 before we signed a contract or they became part of DBU.
Right. That's shocking, but that's great. Okay.
Shocked me when the check showed up. I said, we need to get to work. These people want to get So.
Okay.
I mean, Paul, you probably didn't see the results of our survey. What is it? Elena, was about 90% people are very dissatisfied with their internet service.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so those are all the people that are going to vote for it.
Yeah.
The other 10%, that's our job to convince them.
Right. Yeah, I've just never seen a group of people agree on anything. So this would be amazing.
I will say also that the town of Charlotte, I believe it was a unanimous vote to join DBU. Their build out was not granted by MCA because Charlotte has a very heavy RDOF presence there. That it's a big area, and so it was not funded. But that was another unanimous type situation with Charlotte.
Okay,
great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate because Charlotte had a really good package that they put together. But 90%, that's a very large number. And that just reinforces what I said earlier. You have a broadband committee for a reason. There's a problem. There's an infrastructure issue that you need to deal with. And you have reasons for wanting to deal with that. Either there are business reasons, there are quality of life reasons, there are, healthcare, aging in place, maintaining a youthful population, whatever those reasons are, you have a reason and you know that your current infrastructure is not going to handle it. And I can appreciate that. And that's why I would caution you to consider whatever you look at for investment in your town as an infrastructure upgrade. You're not going to go without roads and culverts and that kind of thing. You shouldn't go without the proper infrastructure to serve your constituents with broadband, in my opinion, whether it's us or anybody else. I mean, you really need to concentrate on this as an infrastructure issue, in my opinion.
anything else? If not, Tim, I want to thank you and your team for having given us this presentation. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could send a copy of your PowerPoint to me, we'll keep it confidential within the committee.
We're not worried about it. We don't have anything to hide. We'll send it to you.
Cool.
Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'm getting to really like these meetings because every time I go into one, I've got some mistaken impressions that they're more than happy to correct. In fact, they don't even know I'm not right, but these have been very, very useful to me. Hopefully to all you guys too.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
John had a question with the other providers about, ability to serve, with trucks and, service people. And I felt that I've had Pioneer. I was their first customer when Wabanaki's first customer, and then I was their first customer when they transitioned. And so Pioneer was very helpful in a place where there was zero internet. I was their customer for 7 years. I've since transitioned away, but they've always provided excellent service. I have nothing but good things to say about them.
That's good to hear.
Seems like you're a paid spokesman.
I know, and it's only because I use the product. It's not no other, no other reason.
Well,
But I did sign up for their fiber optic course so I could better understand and make business decisions based on that. And so I don't know that I'll ever leave my current provider because I already have the best fiber you could ever have. But I would certainly take on additional service fiber for backup or other projects. And so the more options, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Hey, Paul, since you're taking some of the classes from Pioneer, what do they do with all that data, that information that they gather as far as usage and
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I can imagine that some people could view that as them monitoring and storing information and this kind of thing. And from my understanding and perspective, that's not the type of monitoring that's going on. They might monitor the type of traffic from a particular region or street, but they're not looking at bit level content like where you're shopping or any of that kind of stuff. That's a different mechanism that I don't believe that they're involved in. And so
yeah, no, I wasn't concerned about that. It was, do they use that information to improve the services? Do they use it because some of the amplifiers or relays along their main part of their lines? I mean, that's what I was more concerned about.
Yeah.
How do they use that to improve service?
Yeah. So I have a critical business where with employees, if all of our call center is relying on the internet, the minute that we go down, they get a call from us, which didn't happen very often. But what he will tell you and what he said in class is that not only does their network monitoring alert them to outages, but usually it's the customer calling. That's usually within 2 or 3 minutes. The customer will alert them even before their network monitoring system for high demand customers. And so, did that address your question, John? Or
yeah. My next question is probably for Scotty. I mean, I agree. This is an infrastructure issue, but do you think this is going to cost, I think, some large bucks. Do you think that's something that the residents would entertain?
No.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. Thanks.
Well, yeah, this is my concern. We can fill out surveys all we want, but I
honestly don't think you're going to get the customers to go with DBU. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I sure the facts will back it up when we start going out with, surveys or whatever. If we need to go door to door to find out, that's one thing we can do too. But it's just my opinion that we have more miles than we have customers for DBU.
Right.
But I think the federal government is leaning towards the infrastructure being owned by the towns because it's federal funds rather than going into the private pockets of the private sector. They seem to think it's a better investment if it's owned by the communities.
I'm real new to this, so I don't know. I don't think that I'd want the liability of the loan if if something happens with DBU.
Yeah, I agree. But again, the guys writing the checks, I think they want the community to own it rather than maybe some of the private sector.
Elaine,
And
with
I-
some of the other towns that you've served, do they have these same concerns where we don't think that they're gonna sign up, but they do? Has that happened yet?
So, a lot of the communities that so far have joined DBU, for example, have been so unserved or underserved. For example, I will say that I have a camp on Pleasant Lake in Alexander, and basically it's DSL or nothing. And so it was a no-brainer for Alexander to join, really. Uh, so I do know that whether or not in a lot of communities, regardless of which option basically that's chosen, is the concern as to whether or not it will raise taxes, whether or not there's an appetite to take on this kind of loan or whatever. So it really comes down to, there's one community that I'm working with that when they were looking at these numbers, the committee went straight to the select board and said, look, we could be looking at borrowing X amount of dollars. Do you approve of this? And that select board said, yes, absolutely. And so it varies by community, in all honesty. But in every community, it's basically they want to, is this going to impact my taxes? So I work with Eastport just like I work with Perry, and Eastport has the same concerns. Like, is this going to impact taxes? Is this going to, and it's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is the mechanism, if let's say it fails down the road, is the mechanism to remedy that debt a tax increase?
If you were to join DBU, I'm really not in the position to answer that but from a municipal perspective, that it would have to be if DBU failed, and it hasn't so far, and they've been around since 2017 and only getting bigger. I would expect, so the note would have to be paid back somehow, and the only way to do that is through tax revenue.
So how long is it gonna take if they don't go under, just as is, based on area towns that have DBU? How long the average is it gonna take to pay back the loan?
So that is a question really for DBU, based on, because every community is different. My understanding, from some communities like Callis and Baileyville, they went straight to the bank. There weren't these kind of grants available. So they borrowed all of it and really stuck their necks out there and said, okay, we think this will work. And then other communities are paying less, they have less of a loan. And then to fully understand the cooperative model, and I think Ray might have asked me this question, or maybe asked Danny from DBU a while ago, is that, for example, Callis and Baileyville have a bigger loan because they borrowed it all.
Yeah.
And say Pleasant Point, for example, would have a smaller loan. And so therefore, that Pleasant Point would most likely have a much smaller take rate because of the population size, as opposed to, so the true cooperative model is the money gets pooled, whether you're big or small, whether you have a big loan or a small loan, it gets pooled to ensure the stability of the entire.
And maybe Chris can address this. I think the part of the Pleasant Point model would be the subsidy that is granted through the Internet Act, whatever the proper name is, but that would help support that would help that subsidy. Basically, they get free internet, or the first $75 is free. And so if you have 150 or 200 signups where that's being subsidized, would that help this project to help ensure that it doesn't fail?
Well, the ACP program is out there for everybody, first, just make sure everybody understands that, just a different amount. But no, it has.
Well, 35 for non-natives and then 75.
Yep. Yep. But the ACP program has no impact on whether they would do a build, not do a build, or the construction costs or anyway. It just helps you afford your monthly bill.
No, what I'm saying though is that does that help DBU not go under because it's like quote unquote guaranteed income?
Well, I mean, in terms of the talk of like
Now it goes to the ISP, I think, doesn't it?
Well, $25 of it goes to DBU, and then the rest of it goes to the ISP. Is that correct, Chris?
That's the DBU model, correct?
Right.
As far as the split of pay. Now, how that works with the ACP, Tim would be the administrator of that because you also have, people that you can have your bill be higher than the amount or whatever. So it's not that it covers everybody's bill or half or whatever. But the talk if you think of DBU going under for whatever reason in any of these scenarios, remember that what you built was a capital asset. Nobody's going to go, oh, DBU's out. I guess we don't have internet now. A no telco, a CCI, somebody would come in and offer to buy the DBU assets if that happened.
Like pennies on the dollar type of thing, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a viable asset. So that would be, up to the receivership of whatever the contracts say. So my point being that even if DBU were to go under, you would likely never end up as the municipality, the town holding that note to pay because somebody else is going to come by that asset, which also includes the debt load.
Yeah. And might be Pioneer. I mean, I know that he's always interested in purchasing.
Yep. Just remember that what you're doing, aside from the fact that it's an internet network, is you're building a capital asset that will always have value as long as it's a viable, business.
That's a good point. Elaine, do you think that would be the way to sell it to the town?
I really think the committee has a ways to go. You still have many more or quite a few more to talk to. I believe next week you're hearing from Axiom, if I remember correctly.
No, next week
And
should be trade
is it Trail Runner?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, right. Axiom is the end of the month.
Yep.
So Trail Runner will be presenting next week. They have a presence in Perry. So therefore they were invited. And then after that is Axiom. Axiom has an interesting model as well. And so once you kind of hear, I think you need to hear all of these models and decide what will work. I would definitely recommend talking with Eastport, reaching out to Eastport, joining their meetings, whatever, because they're on the same path that you are, that Perry is. They're just further ahead because they've been at this for a while longer. So a lot of the, they have in a way kind of crunched the numbers hypothetically what the take rate would need to be and they hypothetically crunched those numbers. And so there's a lot of community outreach to make sure that people understand what's going on. And if the committee decides not to move forward with anything, you can just make that recommendation to your select board. We're not moving, we're just going to stay with what we have. But you at least need to hear from everybody and present that information to the select board and get their feeling. You've got to sell it to the select board before you can sell it to the public, really, by and large. Not necessarily. If you have that strong, if the community has really strong feelings about something, they can pressure a select board one way or the other. And that's a fact, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah.
Yep. So,
I've been-
but you need to get all your ducks in a row. You need to understand everything that's being offered. I think that you guys are also going to be interested in hearing from Axiom. And so all you're doing right now is information gathering at this point. And that's just to look at it that way before trying to sell something, to the public. You at least need to hear from everybody first. So I think you'll be interested in Axiom as well, which is different yet kind of similar. So as tonight's.
Yeah.
So
Hey, Ray, the attacking this as an infrastructure issue, do you have any plans or do you have a course of action that we can convince the selectmen and the residents of Perry that, yeah, this is an infrastructure issue. I mean, no different than roads or electricity, and it's an investment. And I think people want to ask, when will they see the return on their investment? How will it improve? I mean, we know how it's going to improve their lives, but a lot of people just want to see the bottom line. So do we have an approach to that?
Well, I can only speak for myself because we as a committee haven't really talked about this yet. But I'll be honest that I've only thought about it at a high level because I don't want to waste my thinking process trying to put together some detailed thinking when I don't know what we're going to agree on. I mean, we have to go through this process, as Elaine said. We've got to collect the data and we have to analyze the data. Once we analyze the data, hopefully we're going to come to some sort of consensus that we believe makes sense for the community. At that point, then we can come up with a strategy of how we're going to have our dialogue with the select board and hopefully then with the community at large. That's
I
my
also think it's important to let the public know. I know you already are posting these publicly, et cetera, et cetera. And that's great, Paul, as a resident that you're showing up, but to ask other people to show up or give them the link to the recording so they can start talking about it too. I mean, community outreach, at least understanding of what you're doing or what you're examining. It can never start too early.
Sure.
But to start, pushing one over the other, you really need to do your due diligence, which is what
Right.
you're doing and what MCA is requiring you to do.
I mean, we're posted on the website and we're posted
Yeah.
on Facebook. So,
Yep.
without money, that's about all we can do right now.
I
Except
know.
we want to
I
go
know.
to different places and hang up a poster somewhere.
It is tough. Yep.
Scott, do you know, I think Ann is on the Eastport board too. Is that right?
I honestly don't know.
Oh,
if
okay.
Ann- What committee's on? I really don't know.
Yeah, okay.
She's
Oh.
not on the committee, Paul.
No.
Okay,
Um,
I thought I saw her name somewhere.
No.
Chris, anything else you might want to add?
No, you guys are doing great. Keep it up.
Thank you. Why don't we call it a night and I'm going to go have some dinner.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
very much,
everyone.
I'm gonna go
Thank
rest my
you.
brain. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Good night.
Thanks.